Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to the Combat Carnivore. And if it's your first time, welcome to the Combat Carnivore. And seriously consider liking and subscribing and doing all the social media platform things that you know how to do. And if you're wondering what the Combat Carnivore is all about, it's about us, you and I, taking back ownership and responsibility and autonomy over our own health and vitality. And actually, what this video is going to be about is about the corruption of our food and medical system that we're going to get into. But my goal is to help get rid of the mental health crises that's currently happening all over the world. Right now, the current intervention methods for people who are on a very dark path, maybe to suicide, maybe to harm themselves, the current intervention methods right now are completely garbage, especially with combat veterans. The statistics, if you go and look them up, are extremely outrageous, horrendous, egregious. If you were to look and just accept and sit with those statistics of how many people are deciding to end their own lives every single day, it's hard to sleep at night knowing that is the case. And what's even worse about that is it's extremely preventable. And the current intervention methods right now are not doing a very good job about it whatsoever. And so I believe here at the Combat Carnivore, we have the most by far effective intervention methods for people who are on that path. I know I was one of those people. I have multiple people that I have helped. So if you or somebody you know is in a very dark place, please do not hesitate. But at the very least, I am creating this channel in order to try to get this message out to as many people as possible and to start to unveil the horrific nature that is our food and drug industry. So we have Make Veterans Great Again, hats, hoodies, shirts, and this inventory is going to grow. However, we are going to take the proceeds from this and we are going to try and get this message out to as many people as possible to combat the corrupt food system that we currently live in and try to start saving as many lives as possible, especially veterans. Let's go ahead and get on to today's video, which is quite scary. And the further we get into it, the scarier it gets. So I already made a video called Why a Healthy Diet is a Scam. And when you look at what a healthy diet is, and I don't want to get into it because it always makes me mad. People out there are trying to research, they're trying to become healthy, but what sucks is all the information out there is so garbage. It's so ridiculous. And in order to get to the truth, the roots of what a proper human diet is, you have to dig through mountains and mountains of garbage and bullshit. And so the reason I get up every morning, the reason I'm creating this channel is to try to create as many voices, as much momentum in the correct direction to try to combat the amount of misinformation that's out there. If this video or this information that I produce can at least create a little bit of kind of critical thought, or I guess some kind of inner dialogue questioning what you eat every day and what you believe to be healthy, at least if you start that questioning, maybe I can help as many people as possible out there get off of this corruption train. It sucks because it's so much easier to be on it right off the bat that what I'm about to say in this video might be met with some resistance, right? Because social norms are no longer developed by our society. Our social norms are kind of consumed. We consume our culture. We watch movies and we watch TV and we allow that to become our culture. So we consume what it is. And we're kind of used to being just told what's healthy and what's not healthy, and we just assume that's correct. But it's important we start questioning where that all came from, where that all stems from, which is what I'm about to get into right now. Because unfortunately, the two major influences on our nutritional guidelines and perceptions come from very two corrupt systems, in my opinion. And I think a lot of what we're putting into our body, the poison that we're putting into our body, is causing major distress on our mental processes, on our chemical, biological, and physiological makeups. That sums up to say that I believe that what we put in our body directly affects our mental state, especially in a chronic pursuit. And what I mean by that is maybe right now, you eat something that's not very good for you. It's not like you feel more depressed right off the bat. You know what I mean? I feel pretty healthy after I eat this, no problem. But as time goes on, as you continuously put this poison in your body slowly starts to break down. Attrition, and your body's ability to fend off these poisons and these toxins goes lower and lower and lower. And then all of a sudden you're in a state of chronic depression, chronic anxiety, so on and so forth, brain fog that you can't seem to get over. And especially with our veterans, I know there's a direct connection there because I experienced it in a horrific state for 10 years, and it took me so much digging to get out of that, to do the research on my own, to maybe question, put a little bit of question of where my nutrition comes from what my doctors were saying. And if I had listened to my doctors and I didn't question anything, I would still be in that suffering state. So I'm glad I did the independent research in order to question, to do my own experiments with my diet, with my lifestyle, to get to this point. And I was in such a bad place that when I would eat certain foods, I would have panic attacks. It was like a physiological punch to the face of like these chemicals being dumped, and I would have these panic attacks that I felt like I couldn't control, and it was horrible. And I would not only have that, I would have a bunch of physical, I felt like I had acute flu-like symptoms 2 to 3 days a week where I would be throwing up. Everything would be going out every hole. It was not good. Massive migraines, debilitating 2 to 3 times a week. But my mental state was so much worse and so much more of a torturous imposition on my life than all those horrible physical symptoms, which I only named a fraction of. To which all went away once I went on a carnivore, no-carb diet. And all the foods right here that are not mentioned, like fatty red meat, is the most nutrient-dense food that you can put in your body that has all the minerals that you need, right, in the right proportions. And I want to say minerals, I should have said nutrients. It's got all the proper nutrients that you need in the right proportions, but it's not even mentioned in here. And I have an entire video that was way in depth, right? Pretty much just me being frustrated with the fact that this is when you try to do your independent research and you type into Google, you have this AI overview, which is kind of like this almost consensus to say, like, objectively, this is what a healthy diet is. Are you kidding me? And I already got mad about this, but essential factors for a balanced diet, and carbs is the number one thing. There's no such thing as an essential carb. Fiber. In that last video, I showed the study that how getting rid of fiber alleviated all those symptoms, right, of constipation, pain, so on and so forth. Whole grains, fruits and vegetables, these things, right? And protein, lean proteins like fish, chicken, turkey, like eggs are good, but like beans, nuts, and tofu, are you serious? It's embarrassing that this is what we have idolized as proper nutrition. When you type in what is a healthy diet and you go to images, God, I bet you're going to see leafy greens and fruits. I see like a fraction of meat. You know, I mean, look at this, barely 2 eggs and the rest of it greens. Over here, do I even see any meat products? Oh my, there's no animal products on there. It's usually just fruits and vegetables and grains. Look at this, like almost no dairy products, if at all. It's this, look at this. Like, this is the image we have painted in ourselves of a healthy diet. Even this has an EKG on the heart to show you that this is healthy. This is not healthy. So why is it like this? Well, there's got to be some research. There's got to be some reason why this is a healthy diet, or we perceive it, because there's obviously studies on that, and science is like the highest authority when it comes to learning these things. Let me tell you something. One, I'm going to tell you why the studies are completely off. But 2, science is bought and paid for. And what I mean by that is you can make science look however you want. And we're going to look into how that's been corrupted as we get later in the video. But science can look any way you want. And as we began to get that trust for science, people started trusting science. Companies started buying off scientists to make their narrative and their agenda work. And Americans, because we consume our culture, are very easily manipulated, and our social norms are very easily structured by the powers that be. And you're going to see this as we continue on in the video. It's mind-blowing, and it's almost, when I do this research, and I'm not even like diving deep in, I'm just showing you what you can Google. Right? We can go into all the deeper papers if we want, but what I'm doing is I'm just Googling, and the information is out there. So you could do this research. It's not a secret. It's not a conspiracy theory. You can do this research. Like, there was even a New York Times article, right, showing this, and NPR, so on and so forth. So I digress. So anywho, one thing that I have learned in all my research is that science, no matter how advanced it comes, continues to catch up to our ancestors. Turns out the environment and the diet that forged humans, forged our DNA, forged our biology, ends up being the healthiest for us, and that makes sense. All this weird, abstract, like artificial and superficial imposition on our diet and lifestyle, you think that our bodies in the last 100 to a few thousand years are going to adapt to that quickly after millions of years of a very specific lifestyle and diet? That's just not the case. That's not how DNA works. It takes millions of years for evolution and traits and to get various like species changes or species variations where like organs are created or lost depending on that environment. You can't just change that in a couple hundred years. And like when we consider our current lifestyle with like fluorescent lights and artificial foods and stuff, we're talking like in the last 100 years. That's only a couple generations, and things are changing so drastically now. Like we're looking at adult onset diabetes. Now they just call it type 2 diabetes because a bunch of kids are getting it. And people have the audacity to call that genetic. And they're blaming you. They're blaming your DNA, the essence of who you are, on the reason why you are obese or the reason why you're unhealthy, the reason why you're developing these cancers. I cannot believe that they poison you, then go around and blame you. And then if you question it, you are a social reject. That's how powerful they are. But it turns out the more in alignment you live with our ancestors, like eating red meat, doing very difficult things, right? And challenging yourself, ends up balancing out your internal chemistry, your physiology, and optimizes your biology. That's the way it turns out. And the more research that we do and the more we discover, it's going to continue to unveil that, let's say, to open the curtain, to unveil, right, to unmask the man behind the curtain. That's what's going to happen. And once we realize that logical step, then it doesn't matter what all this garbage research is showing. It'll show this, it'll show that, it'll go up and down, it'll contradict itself over and over and over. Yet, I bet you the people that ignored all that BS and continued to live on a carnivore, very heavy animal-based diet with red meat, drinking clean water, and doing hard work, I bet they were the most healthy people that you could possibly come into contact with. As people were easily like, what's the new science? What are the new studies? They're the ones who are getting manipulated to, buying the wrong food, to buying the wrong supplements, to buying the magic elixir, to being a constant customer of the drug companies. I need to get off my high horse and get into this video. So, anywho, so where does all this come? What is a healthy diet, and why do they get to like objectively with authority make this claim? So let's move on. Let's see how I did this. Oh, what impact did the Seventh-day Adventists have on our nutritional understanding? What's very interesting is the Seventh-day Adventist, right, which some people like to call a cult. I think that's a little bit too far. I think there's a lot of nuance when it comes to your belief systems, and I don't believe that they're trying to do wrong. However, the church, which began in the mid-1800s in the United States, has explicitly connected food and theology and encouraged a vegetarian lifestyle. Founding member Ellen G. White, and by the way, you can go into the prophets and the prophetesses, so on and so forth, with a lot. And I don't want to start like smashing the church, but there's a lot of plagiarism happening and a lot of corruption happening. But just from this part, which like I'm not trying to throw down on a religious group, but they believe, and these people, these founding members, believed that meat encouraged sexual like urges and behaviors, and that they needed to abstain from lust. They had a lot of power in making that connection of what you eat influences the way you are, basically, influences your behavior. And so, as a result, what they started doing is like rehabilitating people with certain drastic methods, which we will get into, but they also started influencing food. All right, creating healthy food. So the Seventh-day Adventists started pushing a bunch of food to the public. The church has developed and mass-produced plant-based foods such as breakfast cereals, Kellogg's, we'll get into that, soy milk, which, oh my God, the phytoestrogens and the amount of damage soy can do to you, and meat analogs. For example, under the direction of physician John Kellogg, here it comes, the church created an early health spa that served a low-fat diet rich in whole grains, fiber, nuts, as well as flaked cereals like cornflakes. Man, let's go ahead and look back over here. What is a healthy diet, right? Vegetables, whole grains, right? Soy, tofu, and the proteins. I mean, it's so analogous. I wonder why. All right. Influencing non-members. The church's organizational structure, which includes education, healthcare, and development, has influenced the diets of non-members around the world. The church's efforts have led to worldwide interest in plant-based nutrition, which some say can reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase longevity. False on both accounts. However, that's not what we're talking about today. What we are trying to say is that a lot of people don't realize that the nutrition influence, science studies, research, so on and so forth, was heavily influenced by these people. And you will be very surprised to see how much the Seventh-day Adventists, which is a religious group and they have a religious agenda against meat, have an influence on nutritional sciences, on dietitian guidelines, and how many food companies do they own? I need to do that research. But I mean, Kellogg's cereal, they own multiple, as they said, they develop and mass produce plant-based foods. Okay? They are in the business. So they have a major business and influence in our food system that is religiously backed and based. They have a religious agenda to get us all to be basically like sterile, not wanting sex, like no lust, no reproduction. Like they believe that like acting on lust is a sin. And so they literally created these foods and these lifestyles and this message to try to get the rest of us to be like dormant, to be content with like grain foods. So that way we don't focus on like impure thoughts. And let's get into that. So let's go see what the next thing is. Oh man. So this is just something I was reading, that John Harvey Kellogg, was very against masturbation and would even perform circumcisions without anesthesia on both girls and boys, to try to get them to stop masturbating and wanting to have sex. And there was even like preventing girls from spreading their legs with certain, like, let's say special hobbies. And they wanted to include a bland diet, a special creation of cornflakes. And they mass marketed, right, these products to help prevent the world from impure thoughts. This is where cereals come from, like these grain-based cereals that are low-fat, high-grain, like high-sugar, processed foods, are meant to like chemically castrate you in essence. John Harvey Kellogg, the father of the prepared breakfast food industry. Man, it was all about this vegetarian, biological living, so on and so forth. Kellogg believed in foods that would not excite the passions, right? They are engineering foods. They are actually like engineering what you eat to prevent you to not have passion. It's admitted. Like, it's known. You can Google this. And I'm trying to do like the research in order to not just smash him, because I don't think that he was like a bad guy and he was intentionally doing this. But you have to recognize that he was doing this. And he had a very set agenda. And his agenda was to like rid of the world of impure thought. And he was doing that with his influence, right? His political influence. And he was promoting his own brand, which made him extremely rich for generations. And this is still all writ within the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which is pushing their agenda of a lot of plants and low meat, because it's like, chemically castrating, basically. And just to give you more of an idea on Kellogg, he practiced much of what he preached. He was an avid vegetarian and reportedly celibate in his own 4-decade marriage. And this is a little bit more on his masturbation cures, right? And so this was like his agenda. He was trying to find ways to get people to not be sexual at all because that's what he believed. And he was one of like the main people who had a huge influence on what we consider to be nutritionally healthy. This guy, right? And this is just one of many people within the church who had a major influence. And the church still has a lot of power and major influence within what happens in our nutritional studies and our dietitians. You know, what's very interesting is doctors get almost no education on nutrition, on diet and lifestyle. Instead, they get education on symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment. Medicine. They practice medicine. And what's even more interesting about that is the very few hours of lecture that they get on nutrition. Who do you think they get it from? Who do you think are the authority in diet and nutrition? These guys are the ones who are putting out the healthy nutrition. These guys are the ones who are creating the studies to back their agenda. Science is bought and paid for. And all the money they're making from their Kellogg cereal and other food companies that they mass produce, they're taking that money and they're making research, and that research points to show continuously that they are right and everybody else is wrong. It's kind of what a religion or a cult would do. Now, here's the other side of the coin. Obviously, they are trying to be more healthy, and there's some things that are objective. So at least they're trying to get you away from a lot of negative lifestyle changes like smoking and being lazy and certain things like that. So we have to give them, their goal is to be healthy. They're just wrong. They have a religious agenda that's influencing what they consider to be healthy. So they're trying to make everything in their message point to the fact that they are right. So it's like, this is the way God wanted things, and as a result, you're going to be the most healthy by abiding by that. So they need the conclusions and the solutions to back what their message is. So it's going to be corrupt in nature. It's going to have a false premise, and it's going to be a fallacy. And so it's going to be likely corrupted. It's not going to be objective, right? As we would like to think. But what's interesting is like they had almost no competition forever. Back in the day, there wasn't a lot of money when it came to nutrition and lifestyle in terms of getting healthy. And so they were the ones who kind of got to lead the charge and at the same time have like a monopoly over that kind of research. As a result, you lose the medical system and the insurance system. You lose them a lot of money. And you can go back and forth with the insurance companies. That's neither here or there. But regardless, is you're losing people money by being healthy, by being in control of your own decisions and your own health. But like I said, at least they are attempting to be healthy, right? They're getting you away from smoking. They're getting you away from being lazy, like I was saying. Because the other side of the coin gets even uglier. It gets even uglier than that. It gets uglier than circumcising boys and girls without anesthesia. It gets uglier. And by the way, I only mentioned like a fraction of the weird things that went on with like this sort of like spa that they had for health. I strongly suggest going to do more research on that, but I'm not going to sit here and create a video that's just going to like nonstop smash a religious group. I don't really want to do that. But we have to recognize like the weirdness in it. But in their minds, they're doing the right thing. And so I don't hold that against them. Just they don't realize like the confirmation bias, right? In the echo chambers. So that being said, when you look up what is a healthy diet, this is why you get that. They produce the mountains of BS that gets you here. Their religious influence, their religious agenda, right? Their religious opinions are the reason why we have moved towards this crazy plant-based diet, which does not align with our biological being. As Bart K puts it, your biological gift. I like that. But as we move to the other side of the coin, did cigarette companies really buy food companies? When the cigarette companies were not doing so well anymore, we had a few gentlemen, a few companies, end up buying up food companies like crazy. And this is the crazy part, is I'm just doing simple Googles, and this is like the AI overview. So it's crazy how like the AI can give us such contradicting information. And if you don't know how to use your critical thinking processes, you're going to succumb to the fallacies that these people push. And so let's look at this. R.J. Reynolds owned Nabisco and Del Monte Foods. In the 2000s, tobacco giants like R.J. Reynolds, tobacco giants, began to spin off their food companies and leave the food industry. So at least they left in the 2000s, but I bet you that influence stayed because it's extremely profitable. Philip Morris owned Kraft Foods and General Foods. In the 2000s, tobacco giants like Philip Morris began to spin off their food companies and leave the food industry. Let's go ahead and continue to read. Some say that these tobacco companies left a lasting legacy on the food that we eat. A 2023 study published in the Journal of Addiction found that between 1988 and 2001, tobacco-owned food companies produced more hyper-palatable foods than those not owned by tobacco companies. Surprise! So basically, when I was growing up, when my wife was growing up, everybody in our generation, the millennials, right, and the end of Gen Xers, we were literally eating food that was designed to be addictive, to be as addicting as possible, because food is a drug, and people do not realize that. These people were getting teams of scientists together to hit the sweet spot of like fats, sugars, protein, and this perfect mix to make sure that you get the ultimate dopamine release, so that way you are addicted. Food has turned into a drug, and people do not realize that. When you go out to eat, when you go to these restaurants, they are modified. We already know a lot of our food is genetically engineered, genetically modified by humans over thousands of years. And even more recently, it's been genetically modified even more within a lab. And we have spent decades now trying to get our food as addictive as possible using all of these methods. These foods contain precise amounts of fat, salt, and sugar that cause people to overeat them. The study found that tobacco-owned foods were 29% more likely to be classified as fat and sodium hyperpalatable foods, HPF, and 80% more likely to be classified as carbohydrate and sodium, HPF, than foods that were not tobacco-owned. Some examples of these hyperpalatable foods include Oreo cookies, Kraft macaroni and cheese, Kool-Aid, Jell-O, Hawaiian Punch, Chips Ahoy, cookies, Lunchables. Oh, I should have said that. Chips Ahoy cookies, Lunchables, which, by the way, there's some horrible things I just learned about Lunchables. Triscuit and Ritz crackers and Oscar Mayer hot dogs. Oh, Oscar Mayer hot dogs. All right, let's see. In the 1980s, tobacco giants Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds acquired the major food companies Kraft, General Foods, and Nabisco, allowing tobacco firms to dominate America's food supply and reap billions in sales from popular brands such as Oreo cookies, Kraft macaroni and cheese, and Lunchables. You guys, this is just something that you could Google. It's right in your face. And it's not like they were the only ones. These were just the tobacco companies. But there are plenty of other companies that are trying to do the same thing, and their effects, their everlasting effects on food, is the other side of the coin. So what sucks is you're just being fed processed food within processed garbage. And what I mean by that is you can't even get like the food in a healthy, reliable way. These foods are usually placed into plastics and they have like plastic liners and other chemicals in there that are not good. So it's like chemicals on top of poisons, on top of processed foods, on top of GMOs, on top of processed sugars, on top of everything. I don't know. I'm trying to say all the words and I'm not doing a very good job. But that's okay. You guys at least can take away that everything about this process is not good. These two sides of the coin have a major, major influence on what you eat. Sugar is in everything. Processed food is everywhere. These foods are drugs, right? Whether you want to admit it or not. So these are the people who are influencing what you eat, what you put into your body. It's no wonder we're all sick and we're all dying and we all have mental disorders left and right. It makes sense because, one, they're trying to make you addicted. They're trying to fill you with garbage. And then when you type in what is a healthy diet, when you're trying to get healthy, now you're blasted by religious people who are influencing the nutritional sciences, which is crazy. So it's like you're stuck here. And what is the way out? How do you know? Right? You have to get through mountains of BS. And it's terrifying. And it's what's even worse is like they blame you. They blame after you put this in your body, that's like, well, it's your genetics. And that's why. After we're going to look here in a bit to show how they were paid off in order to say that. It's all corrupt. Now let's look at this. What is a drug? So I think food is a drug and it's addictive, and people don't want to admit that because they love their food. Sounds like an addiction to me. Once you get rid of carbs, right? Try getting rid of carbs for 2 weeks and you tell me if you're not addicted or not. You tell me after those withdrawals if you're not addicted or not. Drug, a medicine or other substance which has a physiological effect when ingested or otherwise introduced into the body. Effects of sugar on the mental state. Let's check this out. Eating sugar can have a number of effects on mental state, including mood swings, impulsivity, depression, and other effects. Cognitive impairment, memory impairment, lack of focus, high stress levels, personality changes, and addiction. Sugar is a drug. It is, right? It's almost by definition a drug. It's addictive. It causes changes in your mental state, in your physiological state, right? And the sugar addiction is more serious than you think, according to this. But I mean, evidence of sugar addiction. Let's see what this has to say. Evidence of sugar addiction. Behavioral and neurochemical effects of intermittent excessive sugar intake. Okay? So it's not just me. It's just not a conspiracy theory. Experts agree sugar might be as addictive as cocaine. The truth about sugar addiction. But I don't want to get into that part. I don't want to dive into that because it's going to get into a lot of nuance. But do your own research on what sugar actually does to the body and the inflammation, the damage, and the toxic nature it has on the homeostasis of your body, which is required for proper physical, mental, and spiritual health. And you know what sucks is, you know how powerful those food companies are? In 2018, okay, so it's probably only gotten worse. In 2018, a study published in the Journal of the JAMA, right, the JAMA, found that 67% of the calories in the diets of children and adolescents in the U.S. came from ultra-processed foods. We are literally poisoning our children. And then guess who benefits from that? The drug companies. Then now they have lifetime long customers, right, of expensive medications like insulin. Ultra-processed foods are foods that have undergone industrial processes such as hydrogenation and hydrolysis to move from farm to table. Ultra-processed foods are foods that have undergone industrial processes such as hydrogenation, hydrolysis to move from farm to table. These processes can include adding additives to bind ingredients together, increase shelf life, and make foods more palatable. Ultra-processed foods often have more sugar and salt and less fiber than unprocessed and minimally processed foods. Some studies have found that higher consumption of ultra-processed foods are associated with lower diet quality and weight gain in children and adults. So it's like they know that. And they're still allowed to do it. And it's like, yeah, we live in the United States. You can put whatever you want in your body. However, you're falsely educating them. You're not telling them. You're covering up what you're doing to them. And we're about to get into that as well. It's dirty. Sugar companies bribe scientists to blame fats for health issues. AI overview. So it obviously knows this. In the 1960s, the sugar industry paid scientists to downplay the link between sugar and heart disease and instead emphasize the dangers of dietary fat. In 2016, University of California researchers discovered secret documents that showed the industry-backed Sugar Research Foundation paid Harvard scientists to review literature and play down the role of sugar in heart disease. The documents also showed that in 1964, top sugar executive John Hickson planned to use forged science to change sugar's image. It's right here. It is right here. You can Google this. It's like the very first thing that you read. You don't even have to dig that far for it. Some say the sugar industries strategies were sophisticated and similar to those of the tobacco industry. Surprise. For example, in 1965, the Sugar Research Foundation secretly funded a scientific review that downplayed the evidence that linked sugar consumption to blood fat levels. Oh, the sugar industry paid scientists in the 1960s to play down the link between sugar and heart disease and promote saturated fat as the culprit instead. And this is in the New York Times, right? This is crazy because my dad, still as intelligent as he is, it's like the brainwashing that happened while he was being raised during this time. He is so focused, like, you do a carnivore diet, but I have high saturated fat, but I have high cholesterol. I have a genetic disposition, you know what I mean, for heart disease and so on and so forth. They got to him. And my dad is one of the greatest men that's ever lived. And they brainwashed him. He's one of the most intelligent people, but the brainwashing was so effective. And it's all corrupt. It's right here. It's corrupt. And when I show him this, he still has concerns about his cholesterol, which we will talk about, so on and so forth. Oh my God. NPR, 50 years ago, sugar industry quietly paid scientists. Now we're getting into a study, right? Conclusions, Coca-Cola results. Emails identified two main strategies regarding information and messaging and constituency building associated with a series of practices and mechanisms that could influence public health nutrition. Despite publications claiming independence, we found evidence that Coca-Cola made significant efforts to divert attention from its role as a funding source by diversifying funding partners and, in some cases, withholding information on the funding involved. We also found documentation that Coca-Cola supported a network of academies as an email family that promoted messages associated with its public relations strategy and sought to support those academics in advancing their careers and building their affiliated public health and medical institutions. The reason why I pull this up is to show you that it's still happening. It is still happening. They need you addicted to the food. They need you to keep coming back. They need to continue to make a profit. And then at the same time, you see right here that they are still trying to obfuscate their relationship with influencing the sciences, with influencing their public image of what health is and their relation to it. They don't want direct relations that their companies, with the insane amounts of sugar they put into their product to make it addictive, to damage your body, they don't want that connection to be just pointed at them. They want you to think that somehow the reason you're fat is due to saturated fat and the fact that you have a genetic disposition. Coca-Cola sought to obscure its relationship with researchers, minimize the public perception of its role, and use these researchers to promote industry-friendly messaging. More robust approaches for managing conflicts of interest are needed to address diffuse and obscured patterns of industry influence. That was hard for me to read. But basically saying that Coca-Cola is still doing this. This is a modern thing. Coca-Cola, by the way, if you look up all the different companies that Coca-Cola owns and all the ways they're invested, involved, and influencing the food industry, it's terrifying. And they put out so many studies. I think they put out the most studies, I don't know if that's true, on your health. Imagine what they're going to find. Science is bought and paid for. How Coca-Cola disguised its influence on science about sugar and health. What happened? A growing body of science is too much sugar is bad for our health. And Coca-Cola has a history of pouring money into misinformation campaigns aimed at casting doubt on that evidence. So, and the reason why I'm just pulling this up and going through is that you could do your own research. This is all here. It's not a conspiracy theory anymore. You can just look it up. I go to NPR. 50 years ago, sugar industry quietly paid for scientists to blame fat, right? I think this is a little bit out of order, but still, it's on the theme. And that's NPR, all right? And what's insane is not only is it continuously happening, right? But when we look at our past, we look at the fact that this politics, this corruption, is what made our food pyramid. Man, when you look at the food pyramid, it's garbage. Use sparingly fat and oils. Our bodies are designed to run on healthy fats. That's just fact. Like my diet is 70 to 80% fat. Most of it saturated fat because that's what's healthiest for you as a human. Your ancestors survived for millions of years eating this to create the biology that is you and your genetics like fat. Period. And I already got into this video, so go check out my video on why a healthy diet is a scam, because we go into how all this garbage of like what a healthy fat is and they try to promote are like seed oils and vegetable oils, and pretty much most of it are plant-based oils, which is garbage. They tell you to eat, like right here, this influence of look, they even have a bowl of cereal right here, right? That's probably Kellogg's cereal right there. High grains, right? Low fat. And then next up we have our fruits and vegetables, and then we barely touch our good fats right here in our proteins and animal products, and then use sparingly our fats and oils. And at least sweets are way up there, right? But these food pyramids have been corrupted, these food pyramids have been designed by corrupt entities. And then we move on to even USA Today. This is in USA Today, the New York Times, NPR, and still somehow nobody knows. The powers that be do not let this make traction. They don't allow this to have an influence on our day-to-day lives, on our common knowledge base, on our education system. Study shows the sugar industry lied about heart disease. The group paid the equivalent of $48,000 in 2016. So what's even crazy is not only that it's in some of the biggest news outlets, but on top of that, we know exactly what they were paid. The equivalent of $48,000 in 2016. That is what your health was worth. Your mental health, shortening your lives, giving you chronic illness. They were willing to sell out for $48,000. They were willing to trade your health that will influence most of the modern world. They were willing to sell out for $48,000. That's what it was worth, your health. So if you're a veteran and you're watching this, I want you to know that you are being poisoned. Your brain is being inflamed. You're addicted to food, and that's causing havoc. And the way you feel right now mentally, and I'll get into this a little bit, but yes, you dealt with traumas, but that's not the end-all be-all. The human disposition is not to come across traumas and then be sick for the rest of their lives. That's just not viable. Your ancestors dealt with traumas all the time. Your ancestors, a daily life just to get food, would probably put a modern day like Gen Zer in a psych ward of trauma, right? No, their daily life was to handle atrocities and traumas and to move on and to learn from them. We are not designed to be crushed under the pressure of something that happened to us in the past. We have the capability and the capacity to move on. However, all the food that you're eating and that you've been fed when you go through these extremely stressful states for long periods of time, you no longer are getting the resources, the nutrients, the fuel that your body requires, and especially your brain being such an energy-taxing organ, the most, if I remember correctly. You are being malnourished. You are being poisoned. And you are being poisoned because somebody sold out $48,000. $48,000 to trade for how you feel right now. If you are in mental distress or chronic distress, know that they sold out $48,000 for your health as a trade. That's what it was worth. American Health, all these atrocious diseases that keep popping up, kids getting fatter and fatter, sicker and sicker, people living shorter now, the average lifespan now finally going in reverse. This is a result. This is a result of their corruption. And now you are suffering because of it. And when you try to take health into your own hands, this is the bullshit. This is the bullshit you have to deal with. And you have to uncover mountains of bullshit in order to get to the right place. And then when you try to get off of this, and this is why I coach, this is why I'm a carnivore coach, is because you could get off of this the wrong way and cause a lot of damage to your body because you have been physically addicted to these chemicals, to these processes your entire life, most likely. And not to blame the military too much, but what they fed you just made things worse. They just pretty much put the nail in the coffin on your digestive system, and we can fix that. But we have to realize and recognize when we research things, and when you hear weirdos like me talk about carnivore diet can save people, I am the one that's the social outcast, even though this is somehow normalcy. Religious fanatics creating a nutrition system in the nutritional sciences while chemically castrating people, in essence, and physically mutilating genitalia of boys and girls with no anesthesia. That's normal. Eating ultra-processed foods, genetically modified foods, and basically engine lubricant with vegetable and seed oils, that's normal. And the way you feel right now is normal. And the only way that they can fix you is just by giving you more androgynous chemicals. Like they're just like, here you go, take more chemicals that are going to modify your neurotransmitters. We understand that your internal physiology and those internal chemical processes are already out of whack. So here, let's just go ahead and add more synthetic chemicals into your body. Here you go. And I'm not a doctor, right? And it's very important that if you're taking medications right now, it's important that we don't drastically shift that right away. Always consult your doctor. Don't get off your medications, and which, by the way, they shouldn't have put you on in the first place, in my opinion, because now you're chemically dependent on that as well, and that affects your neurotransmitters, which can be very detrimental to your mental health. So I'm not a doctor, so consult your healthcare physician, but just know that I got off all my medications, and I am thriving, and I don't have brain fog, anxiety, panic disorder anymore. It's all gone. And part of it was just understanding the system, the corrupt system that I was in. You're either being influenced, like when you walk in that grocery store and you see these fucking mountains of shelves of garbage food in plastic and other processed chemicals. They are designed by teams of scientists to make you addicted. It's ultra processed. It's got all these chemicals on it that are not designed for your body. Highly processed foods, high concentrated amounts of sugar in liquid form and powder form, all to make you addicted and sick. And then on top of that, if you try to become healthy, now it's fruits and vegetables, right? And red meat is like this tiny corner in that entire grocery store. It's pretty freaking ridiculous. And now I'm going to show you something that is terrifying. Russell Brand interviews Coca-Cola whistleblower on big food, diabetes drugs. Your obesity is their profit. And then if we look at this real quick, TrueMed founder Callie Means, a former Coca-Cola consultant, spoke out against Big Pharma on Brand's show. Your obesity is their profit, Brand said, summing up Big Pharma and big food collusion. And so we're about to watch a video real quick about TrueMed founder Callie Means, a former Coca-Cola consultant, spoke out against Big Pharma on Brand show. I strongly suggest you watch the entire thing after this video because it is terrifying. There's a collusion between big food companies and Big Pharma. They are working together. It is a corrupt system. They know the more you eat this garbage food, the more customers they are creating for the medical industry that need drugs, that go to the doctors who prescribe them this garbage medication, right? This is horrible. So let's go ahead then and start this video. One thing he said is this is the biggest story in the United States right now. People do not realize that we are imploding. Our veterans are committing suicide at 4 times the rate than our enemies can kill our soldiers. We kill ourselves. We implode at 4 times the rate than what our enemies can do. We are more effective at killing ourselves than what our enemies can do. That is terrifying. People don't realize so many of these issues, so many of these drags on the medical system are making certain people rich, but it's our tax dollars, it's our money, it's our resources, right, that are being drained because these food companies are poisoning people. Your mental health, your physical health, the overall health of the nation is greatly influenced by what we eat. And it is the biggest story in the United States right now, and nobody is talking about it. It's like when we look at the suicide rates and how many people are dying from heart disease and how many people are dying from cardiovascular disease and how many people are dying from cancer and so on and so forth. These are non-communicable diseases. These are metabolic issues that can be avoided if you just eat properly. This is like a national health crisis, and nobody's taking it seriously. It's like a national defense issue. Terrorists cannot kill us as quickly as we can kill ourselves. This is terrifying. This drug that they are trying to put kids on, 12 and older, right? They're trying to put these kids on a drug that they're going to be on for life. And if they get off of it, that they are going to have long-lasting metabolic issues. Are you kidding me? For being obese. They would rather put them as a lifetime customer. They would rather ruin their lives by putting them on this drug than tell them about healthy diet and lifestyle. Continue drinking the Coca-Cola. Continue eating the processed foods. We just need to put you on this drug because you're obese. Literally trillions of dollars, the most expensive drug, and you are going to have to be a lifetime member of this drug, right? And they're blaming, it's like they don't want you to stop putting the shit food in your body because they make money off of it. So now they're still going to make money off your addiction, and now on the flip side, they're going to make money off the fact that you are going to be a lifetime customer of this medicine. And the likelihood of you affording that is low. So what ends up happening is you need insurance, so you have to pay for insurance, which, by the way, our insurance companies are incentivized by the government. So not only are you paying the insurance companies directly, but now, on top of that, your tax dollars, our tax dollars, are paying the insurance company, which is a for-profit company, in order to make all these people rich. They are literally manifesting riches, wealth, trillions of dollars off of you, off of poisoning you and keeping you sick. This is what I'm talking about. These companies are the ones who are providing the studies. They're providing the research. They're the ones funding it to make themselves look good. Science is bought and paid for. This is why when you look at all the vegetarians and the vegans and they're throwing these studies at you, and by the way, most of them are garbage studies, you look at who funded them. You look at what their agenda is, and of course it backs what makes them money, or it backs their religious ideology. It just depends which one. And he admits it, right? That was his goal. They're the ones funding it more than the independent researchers. They are spending 11 times more, if I remember correctly, than what the independent researchers are spending. Like I said, the current intervention methods are garbage. They are absolutely garbage. They don't want to tell you to stop the drugs, and they don't want to tell you to, and what I mean by that is they don't want to tell you to stop the things that make them money. They don't want to tell you to stop drinking Coca-Cola. They don't want to tell you to stop eating processed foods, the things that will actually make you healthy and self-reliant. They want you dependent. They want you addicted. And that's what one of the biggest things about this channel is about. He understands, and he knew while working for Coca-Cola, he knew these problems. They were aware of these problems. Okay? Right? Starting with the sellout back in the 1960s, all the way to now, they are dedicated to making you sick. And I shouldn't say it like that. But it seems like they are well aware of it, and they're not trying to change it. Isn't that a weird thing? That these diseases are growing up, though the amount of money we are shoving towards them is insurmountable. Like money I couldn't even comprehend. If I had all that money, I wouldn't even know what to do with it. Yet, Our understanding about it is so good, yet the problem's getting worse. Okay. It's weird because our ancestors didn't have any of these problems, or at least they had them to a fraction of this. And by the way, when he says Alzheimer's and dementia, they're like type 3 diabetes, they're starting to recognize that the brain becomes insulin resistant, depending on who you talk to, because you talk to Professor Bart Kay, he is going to resist that terminology. But still, what's happening is it's still very real, is the fact that your brain can no longer process this energy. And this is what happened to you as veterans, is your brain is no longer getting the energy sources that it needs, the proper fuel it needs in order to propagate itself and its ability to handle traumas. And as you're dealing with these ultimate stresses, your body's not getting the nutrients, the energy that it needs to carry on forward. And very similar, after years and years and years and years go by, your brain slowly is unable to handle these energy sources, and then it decays kind of like from the inside out. However, you, somebody who's been through trauma, right? You sped that process up very fast. You dealt with stresses. You condensed it all into a short period of time. And so you're dealing with all the stresses and not being able to handle it just like those other patients. And so now it's like sped up and now you can't handle things. Okay, I'm going to end it there and talk about it a little bit, but this video gets even crazier. What he's saying is exactly right. Harvard professors are saying obesity is genetic. It's weird that it would be genetic because for all of human history, people weren't obese all over the place all the time. And especially with how fast the obesity rates increased. There's no way that's genetic, that all of a sudden all of our genetics change and that you're just naturally fat because of your DNA, right? That just does not make sense. Like, I am not a Harvard scientist, but that is bullshit. I know so many people who were fat and their families were fat and they lost weight and they kept it off. I have influenced so many people going carnivore that if that was genetic, they would be fighting against their body to get to that state. However, once you get to that state, it's easy. It's easy to produce energy. It's easy to keep the weight off. That is what is genetic. Your body wants to be in a state of homeostasis. You are the one that's poisoning your body and being out of homeostasis, right? And they say it's genetic. That's such BS. I believe it's because the way different families operate, they influence how you view food. So families that are more health conscious typically don't put as much processed garbage into their kids' mouths, right? And people who don't have that health awareness or that health conscience, I guess, they're okay with putting processed garbage into their kids' mouths at an earlier and earlier age. I remember when I was growing up, coffee was something that only adults drink. As I got older and older, I remember some kids in high school were like drinking coffee. I'm like, oh, okay. And then, that's a little bit like grown up. And now kids are sucking on these fucking latte drinks filled with sugar, filled with caffeine, filled with defense chemicals. And you're putting that in your kids' mouths. Either you're just ignorant to the fact, which is fine because as we've seen, we've been corrupted and we've been brainwashed by the people who influence what we consider healthy. We trust in the powers that be, okay? Or you are actively, and you know that's not good for you, and understanding that's not good for you, you're putting that garbage into your kids. And that makes sense why your kids at younger and younger ages are becoming obese and sick. That makes sense to me. And to me, that's not genetic. That's just who you're surrounded by, your social influence, your social circle, and what they value. Please go look at the rest of this video, especially if you're suffering. We need to get this message out there, and we need to combat all the bullshit that is being produced by these food companies and by these religious fanatics who are trying to chemically castrate you using plant-based foods and get you on an appropriate diet. But know that that's not easy. Waning off SSRIs is a very serious process. And remember, I'm not a doctor. Consult your healthcare provider. Switching your diet from anything to anything else takes 6 to 8 weeks, or you could seriously damage your health and make your transition to the proper human diet way longer than it needs to be, upwards of years from recovering from the damage that you could do by doing this wrong. A lot of people switch over to the carnivore diet very incorrectly. And I went through all the mistakes, which is why I'm here to help. I want to help you. Go join the online community, or schedule some time with me so we can talk about it. And that way I can help. I just want to help. This is what I want to do. I want to get this message to as many people as possible. And if you need more of my time one-on-one with me, let's make that happen. So anyway, love you guys so much. Remember, we're healing the world with steak, strangles, and stoicism. Get this message to as many veterans as possible. Remember, if you want to support the channel and donate, buy a shirt, right? Make veterans great again. Veterans Day is coming up. Especially with the election coming up, it's turning a lot of heads. And so that will massively help get this message out. And always remember, don't do drugs and don't eat vegetables. Love you guys. See you guys next time.